Welcome to the presentation on argument evidence supporting your arguments. We are going to go through several steps, but the focus will be on integrating your sources and information. So step one, for the purposes of this discussion in developing an argumentative essay, is topic generation and investigation. Step two is collecting and evaluating evidence. Step three is generating ideas in a thesis statement. Step four is establishing a position. Step five is synthesizing sources. And step six is concluding in your solutions. So topic generation is the preliminary investigation of your topic. You may have several ideas where you've brainstormed and come up with a list. This is the part where you get a chance to go out and look and say, hey, is there enough evidence to support this? Is it sufficient? Do I need to choose a different topic? Do I need to narrow or broaden my topic so that I can discuss it to make it the appropriate length that the instructor is asking you to do? Collecting and evaluating evidence can be tricky. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. But you want to make sure that you're using databases, government websites, videos, interviews, and so on to make sure that you're collecting enough evidence and information for your argument. Be very mindful when you use newspapers and blogs and things that may contain opinionated language. Those should primarily be used when you're trying to pull on emotions. And you also want to be careful to make sure that the information in those is valid. So you really want to check and make sure that what you're getting from there is information that you can verify somewhere else. Evaluating your sources, you want to make sure they're recent, relevant, and reliable. The author or the authors should be qualified to write the article, and most of the time in credible sources you'll see a team of people or more than one person or someone who is very skilled in their area who has evidence that they've written stuff before, or you might see a government agency that has done studies and things of that nature. So one of the things that you should be coming up with during your preliminary research and after you've evaluated some sources is your thesis statement. Now there is, if you look online and you just use a search engine and put in thesis generator, you will find a couple tools. They rank at the top that will help you construct this. The counter or the concession is just that acknowledging of the other side. Your position in this case that I'm discussing, it's the position that a change is needed. So you're actually discussing a needed change. And then the 3 to 5 supporting points are really the reasons for the needed change. So to establish a position, you're going to decide, well, what change is being needed here. Maybe you found that there's a water shortage and that if we don't change some things, there could be some repercussions of that. And that typically comes with a should statement. Now, synthesizing sources, when someone says synthesizing, I find that some students' brains start to shut down, but it really means just integrating your sources. So if you're synthesizing your sources and supporting your information, you're taking a point, introducing the point, and then integrating that research. You're pulling it all together. You're supporting each point. Now, what I do is I typically ask people to support each point with at least 2 sources. So if you have 3 points, you're going to have 6 sources. Just supporting those. And of course, some sources can be used in different areas, but in general, if you have a pretty lengthy paper, you're going to use around 6 to 10 sources in any given research paper, especially at the college level. So here you see an example of integrating those sources according to Jones 2020. So you see that Jones is one of the sources mentioned, and this is APA format. So research indicates that if the world's population continues to grow at the current rate, there will be a water shortage by 2050. Another study points out the realities of, and here's part of a quote. When you're missing the very first part of a quote, you have to use the ellipse. It says water depletion on a global level. So another study points out the realities of water depletion on a global level. And then it looks like there was probably something after this. So Miller, 2020, page 9, because it's a quote, you will include the page number. Okay, so this next one tells you what types of sources that are out there. You're going to find primary, secondary, and tertiary. I'm not going to go over this entire thing because you can pause the video and look at that. But I do want to call your attention to the best sources for any research in a college essay is a primary source. And you can see interview speeches, diaries, birth certificates, journal articles, newspaper articles, written at the time, and you have to be very careful of those because they can have some biased language in it, meaning the slanted language, opinionated language. The secondary sources are pretty common too. They, usually flow between primary and secondary, and tertiary is really not something you will ever use in a college essay in terms of quoting it um, and using it as a source and citing it. Now, the exception to that might be an encyclopedia, but the rest of those, the catalogs and databases, you want to go to the original source. You want to go to the article. So, like abstracts from an article, I do not allow my students to quote from abstracts. They need to go to the article to do that. So those would be in primary and secondary sources. Now, this is an example of what synthesis looks like live, like in a real paper. The first one that I told you about was sort of just a snapshot of one, but this actually shows you how a topic's introduced. Privacy is by far one of the most important issues on campuses, so you know what topic they're getting ready to talk about. And you can actually pause this video and look at all the different parts to this. So this is synthesis at its best. This is supporting your information in your essay at its best. And this is how to incorporate that. Now, another issue you're going to come across is just the types that you're going to incorporate. Now, in an argumentative or persuasive essay, it is not unheard of to have all three of these. If you're trying to persuade someone that a change is needed, it makes sense that you need to incorporate some emotion. Now, here's the problem with that. When you're incorporating sources, you want them to be credible. Now, how do you incorporate something that's emotional, that's going to emotionally appeal, a personal connection? And I tell students it is okay to find stories about people. Those are usually called case studies if you're looking inside of research. But that might be one way to elicit emotion. You're really looking for that connection to the other human that's reading your paper to say you want them to connect with whatever you're talking about so that they can understand it and sort of be swayed to your side, your like-minded, your connection. So the ethics and credibility is the trustworthiness or authority. Occasionally you'll see that on commercials where a famous person is selling something. So it could just be like right now, Dr. Fauci is giving out information about COVID-19 or something of that nature. Someone who's credible that you believe when they get on there. You might even see a commercial where someone's dressed in white and it indicates that they're a doctor. You're more trusting or not more trusting of them because they're wearing that. So the logic and the reason, the facts, statistics, the case studies, the scientific evidence. Now this does mention case studies as part of a peer-reviewed journal article, which is a little bit different. It's firsthand research that's going on there, observations of maybe a school, like a school scored this, this whole discussion about a school and their scores and how the students are doing at that school. That's really a case of that school. The emotional one that I was referring to is like really an intimate story. Like maybe in a newspaper where someone's house is burned down and they're having a conversation with this person and the news person is telling their story where it can have an emotional impact on the person that's reading the essay. So just to clear that up a little bit. Most of the time, let me go back to this. Most of the time, you'll have all three of these if you really want an effective argument. Now, just a bit of caution here. Make sure that you're trying to avoid those fallacies. I know that in my classes we go over those, but occasionally you can really mess up an argument by making really claims without any type of support. So be very careful of that. Now, conclusions and solutions can be handled differently. You always want to follow your instructor's guidelines, and most of the time, hopefully, you're provided a rubric for that. The conclusion is really that recap after you've provided all your information and your sources. Depending on what your instructor is saying, they may look very different too. You could have a whole solution section that's very involved, offering one or more detailed solutions. My favorite is a solution section that focuses not only on global, but also on the community and the individual level. And usually, what I do is have students do the global and community in a solution section and then just sort of fold in the individual level in the conclusion. So I hope that this helped. The primary purpose of this was really to go over those integrating sources and give you some ideas about how to handle that, which ones are used most, a general idea about that. But I also felt compelled to go through the steps of the essay just as a reminder. I'd like to thank you for listening. I hope that you will go forth and write. And also like and support the channel. I'm trying to crank out some videos to help college students, and your support means a lot. So don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.